Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It is episode 2697 of The Tom Woods Show, and we have our old friend Kevin Dolan here with us. Kevin Dolan is one of these people, like, I feel like it's an injustice in this world that more people don't know who he is. So among many other things, Kevin Dolan went through what I am sure was rather unpleasant experience of being doxxed and having to start his life and career over. But it turns out, in a way, it might have been the best thing that ever happened to him, because now he's doing something very, very valuable. He has something called Exit, which is a fraternity of men who, not all of whom have been doxxed, that's a pretty rare event, but all of whom are working toward bigger and better things. You know, all of whom believe that you shouldn't have to live your life looking around saying, is this really all there is? When you're 28 years old and you have a young family and it's just absolute misery day after day being part of that corporate structure. But he's doing all kinds of interesting and exciting things over there at Exit. So exitgroup.us is the website, I think, right?
Right. That's right.
Okay.
Thank you.
But then the thing is, so Kevin does that, and he has a Substack, and you'll enjoy reading that. But let me tell you something else Kevin does, okay? Kevin goes slumming sometimes. He hangs around with old Woods here. And he is co-owner with me of my Tom Woods School of Life, and he directs the small group program there where people are losing 50 pounds, escaping a horrible job, building a business, learning some skill, whatever it is, and you know, we're accomplishing hard things. Instead of writing angry letters to the editor, we're actually accomplishing things. So the website for that, because I really want you to try it out, is 11freebies.com. So go check that out. And you do other things, Kevin, but those are the things I want to start with. So first of all, welcome back.
Great to be here. Thanks, Tom.
I'm looking forward to seeing you next week in Nashville because our elite mastermind meeting is taking place then. And that is a great group of men. I know there are a couple women who meet together, who all have businesses, and we all work to help each other have even more successful businesses while we're all having fun. We're going to be at the Nashville Predators home opener in a suite, and we're going to be joined by Kane of the WWE. Glenn Jacobs is coming as our guest, and it's just us in this private suite. It's going to be an amazing time. Anyway, you already know that. You wrote a piece some time ago that I wrote about in my newsletter. Now, at this point, the Charlie Kirk shooting is 2-3 weeks out. And I think at this point, we can talk about something other than the absolute shock of the event itself. To me, it was an absolute shock. It was happening. It happened while we were running that Eminence Club event right before the Unconference when I saw you. And so I was with a bunch of Tom Woods people. And I think we all felt like, not that it's ever a good thing, but at least at a time like this, we were all together with other like-minded people. And so we didn't have to deal with people who were dancing on his grave before he was even buried. You know, like we were surrounded by like-minded people. But now that that's passed, I want to talk about something like the deeper meaning of all this. And by that, I mean, a lot of people are saying the thing that made Charlie Kirk great, or that made him stand out, or made him, in fact, morally superior to his opponents, was that he was willing to talk to anybody and have an open dialogue, and that he thought that this rational give and take might advance us to a better society. And so he, according to the way a lot of people have started to think about him, was willing to talk to anybody, anytime, for any length of time about anything, and we would just see, you know, if we agreed with each other or not. Now, your take on this is somewhat different. And as soon as I read it, I instantly adopted it.
Yeah, my take on Charlie Kirk was that his moral superiority was not rooted in the fact that he was about endless dialogue. And I think you saw a contrast between him and Spencer Cox. Spencer Cox made a big deal about, and he's always made a big deal about like, I'm all about talking. I'm all about, communication and consensus and bringing everybody to the table. But Charlie wasn't about endless, waiting for the craziest lib to get on the boat before we could take political action, or having to design the whole political system with the interests of the craziest prog you could find. He was about achieving realistic political objectives. which, yes, involved a lot of persuasion, and it involved a lot of, peeling people off. It also involved, strengthening the base, making people in the base have the arguments at their disposal so they could feel enthusiastic and feel certitude and feel rightness about what they were doing.
Which is why there's no problem with quote unquote preaching to the choir, as I keep saying.
Totally. Yeah, you have to preach to the choir. That
Yeah.
people have to have, pithy and clever ways of articulating what they sort of intuitively know. But yeah, I mean, and what made him better than the communists and the left was that he wasn't at war with God and at war with reality. And I'll say, explicitly what I mean by that is, in order for someone like Mao or Stalin to achieve their political objectives, they had to break people down psychologically because they had to make them assent to this set of crazy propositions, absurdities, right? And, so you eventually, like you see in China, like obviously there's lots of things still to critique about China, but it's a relatively functional, stable society. They're not, killing all the sparrows, and they're not trying to make people, refine steel in their backyards. Like they're not insane the way they were under Mao. But in order to get there, they had to break the whole society down to the foundations and get everybody to say, okay, sure, Chairman Mao, 2 and 2 make 5, whatever you say. And then they were able to actually take control of the society and start governing it. And they had to sort of give, because they're sort of dependent on this army of spiteful mutants, these insane people. They sort of had to give them the revolutionary terror that they were craving in order to gain power. And then, of course, they could dispose of those crazy people afterwards. But even if you're talking about authoritarians on the right, like Lee Kuan Yew or Franco, they didn't have to get everybody to assent to this enormous catalog of absurdities. And I don't think the difference between Mao and Lee Kuan Yew was that Lee Kuan Yew was less committed to power, or less committed to, or more tolerant of challenges to his rule. He just didn't need to destroy people psychologically because he wasn't a leftist. And so if you're talking about it, basically what it comes down to is it's much easier to basically say we're not going to be insane than to say we're not going to be sane. Right? If you go around and say it's against the law to be sane, then you have to psychologically dominate the whole population. If you say we're not going to be insane, well, you have to take care of a handful of crazy people, and because that activation energy is lower, you just have less havoc, less chaos, less bloodshed. And so that, I think, is the root of Charlie's moral superiority. He's just not at war with reality.
You gave a couple of examples. One of them is the idea of systemic racism, which is this thing that you can't really prove. You assume it exists because there are racially disparate outcomes. So therefore it must exist because no other possibility is thinkable. The other thing you mentioned, and maybe there was a third one, but the other thing you mentioned was, of course, the transgender issue. And there it's a question of some people see the world one way, and some people see the world diametrically opposite way about, is this good for a young person or bad for a young person? And so the very thing that you and I think would be good for a young person, which would be to help to guide that person out of whatever psychosis they're enduring, is the opposite of what they believe, because they think we're depriving them of, quote, life-saving care or whatever. There isn't a whole lot of dialogue you can really have about that. Like that either is or it isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I try to take everybody maximally seriously. I try to assume that when people are exercised about an issue the way that the trans people are exercised about this issue, that they, even if there's elements of it that are cynical, they basically mean it. They mean what they're saying. And so if you take them at their word that they mean that not allowing these people to transition medically and chemically is child abuse, then you're sort of stuck with a situation where any compromise on the trans issue means we are countenancing some level of child abuse, and we're sort of saying, like, because obviously they believe that refusing this care is child abuse. We think that obviously providing the care is child abuse, and so the only way you can come to a compromise, and this is where I find Governor Cox so like mealy-mouthed and pathetic.
Just for everybody who doesn't know, that's the governor of Utah.
Right, he was kind of front and center on this issue, so I was kind of using him as the advocate for this other form of consensus, this other form of dialogue that I don't think Charlie Kirk represented. But basically, he was sort of like, well, yeah, we'll let some people castrate their children and destroy their endocrine systems, and not others. And it's like, the only way that you could come to a compromise on that is to abolish the concept of child abuse. Like, because there's nothing you can do to a child that's more damaging, that's more sort of lifelong in its consequences than that. And so it's like, basically, the thrust of my article was to say, like, don't say that Charlie Kirk was all about dialogue, because on a lot of these issues, there's just not that much left to talk about. Like somebody's got to win. Somebody's, in the Civil War, one of the things that you learn in seventh grade history that's actually true is that the Union could not survive both slave and free. Like, somebody's moral vision had to be instantiated. No compromise was possible, and so, or you had to completely separate. Right. Those were your options, right? You couldn't have a unified system of law that accommodated both perspectives. I compared it to like Aztec, human sacrifice. Like, if somebody believes that the sun won't come up unless we, cut people's hearts out on top of a pyramid, like, there's no way for our system of values and our system of laws to accommodate that. You have to just win. You have to stop them performing the sacrifices. And then they have to watch as the sun still comes up, and hopefully, you change their minds that way. But there's no, like, what is there to talk about? There's no ground of evidence for any of this. Like, there's no medical etiology, no set of symptoms you can point to with the trans thing that says, like, oh, this person's really, scientifically a woman. And so these are totally, they're either invisible and real, or they're invisible and fake. And there's nothing for you to grab onto. There's nothing to talk about.
Friends, if you care about your liberty and your financial freedom, you need to hear this. From October 10th to 12th, my friend Mikkel Thorup, host of the Expat Money Show, and who's been a guest on this program several times. In fact, he even came and joined us on the Tom Woods Cruise this year, is bringing together top experts from around the world for the Expat Money Online Summit. And it's completely free to attend. You'll learn how to legally protect your wealth, secure second residencies and citizenships, reduce your tax burden, and own property abroad, all to safeguard your freedom. This year's focus is Latin America, where opportunity is booming. Argentina is shifting to free markets under Javier Milei. El Salvador is undergoing a radical transformation, and Panama and Paraguay are offering simple residency programs. A Plan B is no longer optional, it's essential. Reserve your free ticket at expatmoneysummit.com. That's expatmoneysummit.com. Now, if that's the case, then we're led to what is obviously the next question, which is, if there really is nothing left to talk about on some of these issues that are central to the ideology of a great many millions of people, then what does that mean for what America looks like in terms of governance in the future? That I know it's, we're apt these days to make fun of libertarians who say things like, well, if the president does this today, you might not like what he does when he's a Democrat and he uses the same power. And on some level, in a civilized society, you could understand the principle at work there. That, well, yeah, I guess suppose I wouldn't want my enemies to have that kind of power. The thing is, I've observed my enemies with that kind of power for quite a while, and particularly the past 10, 15 years, it seems like they're not waiting for a right-wing precedent before they act. They're just doing it, and then pretending that only the right wing, which is reacting to them, is responsible, that they themselves have just been innocent bystanders.
Yeah, I think a lot of conservatives would sort of like to believe that they are kind of the moral and spiritual main character of the universe, and therefore, everything that the libs do is somehow a consequence of their moral turpitude, or they didn't do something. But like, they don't believe in castrating children, or land expropriation, or or communism as a punishment. That's not something that they believe because you were too right wing last election. They just believe those things, and you have to deal with the fact that those views are sincerely held. It's not your fault. It's not your responsibility. You can't, you're not going to change that by being extra civil, extra conciliatory with them. Compromise from their point of view. They view our system as fundamentally oppressive. Compromise for them is give us what we want, give us half of what we want now, and we'll come back for the rest in the next election cycle. I mean, that's what it amounts to. There's not, in a functional society that basically has consensus on values, then it's like, whether or not we raise the tax rate 2% or lower the tax rate 2%, these are questions about which we should be civil, and we should be careful about preserving the machinery of the state so that it's not abused in the future, so they won't set a precedent of abuse. That's just not where we are. Like we are in a situation where people have fundamentally alien values to one another. And from their perspective, the right thing to do, they don't think the Constitution's good. They don't think that the rule of law is good. They think it's an impediment to the type of world they want to build and the type of world they want to live in. And so they're committed to breaking it down. There's no cooperative equilibrium here to maintain. And so, I think you have to view it as fundamentally someone's going to be in charge here. Someone's going to decide between these two dipoles. And it should be the people who are not insane. It should be the people who are not at war with reality.
It seems like even in this crazy situation where we are so at odds with each other. Now, Kevin, you're a little younger than I am, but I grew up in the 1980s, and I realize how silly and frivolous it must sound for me to talk about what a wonderful time the 1980s were to grow up in, when I'm sure it was even, from the point of view of the kind of society we want, it was probably better to grow up in 1911, even than in 1980. But the point is, I did grow up in the 1980s, and I have very fond memories of it. And
sure.
By comparison with today, it was absolutely wholesome and innocent by comparison with it. Absolutely was. And,
sure.
We had our disagreements, but, I'm going to my high school reunion this very weekend or a weekend after next. And it's going to be pleasant, and because we still recall those old days, when we knew each other then. And so we don't have any of this craziness. It's like it would have been unthinkable today to have a system like this. Now, it's conceivable that even with a system like today, where we have these radical disagreements that we did not have in the 1980s, no one even thought of these things. We weren't arguing about them. No one thought of them.
Right.
But at least a functioning federal system would have, at least in theory, made it possible for us to somehow coexist, however awkwardly, because it would have been understood, look, this part of the country, everybody just knows you got to live this way, or it's going to be tricky. Or that part of the country, you got to live that way. Now, there's still some remnants of that. But the problem now is you have a federal government and its civil rights division that will consider every wrong thought or word you have as justifying their intervention in your society. And then what do you do? So do you think, can you imagine a scenario in which federalism could somehow salvage something for us? Could you imagine a scenario in which you would say, the society just has to break up? There is no reconciliation possible? I mean, how do you think about that stuff?
I think that federalism, as you're thinking about like sort of the laboratory of democracy, right? You got different people trying different things. I think that works at the level of, different marginal tax rates. I think that when people have moral convictions that are as deep as these moral convictions are, and like I think that's what you have to respect about these people. Like we can say they're insane, we can say that they're wicked. I think they are, but they're in earnest. They really believe that the system that we have built, that our ancestors built, that we live in, is fundamentally oppressive and needs to be destroyed. And so you cannot share power with someone like that. They're not interested in sharing power. I think if there is anything to be salvaged in the federal system, it would almost have to be like a soft secession. It would have to be, an orderly and lawful retreat from a single polity. Which that's all I can imagine, and it's not particularly plausible. Like I don't see how that happens given these people's moral conviction. Like if you tell them like, oh, we're going to smash this machine that you guys have operated basically unchallenged for a century, they're not going to say, yeah, that's what's best for the country. Like, see you later. Good luck. No, they're going to fight for it. They're going to fight for it if they have any will to fight left. And so, I think it's just about being like realistic about who we're dealing with, and the seriousness they take these moral principles. Like they're not going to accept living in the same country with people who don't believe that disparate outcomes by demographic are a result of oppression. Like they're not just going to accept that like the inequality is natural and normal. They're not going to accept that that we have these kids and we're just not letting them express their sexual identity. That's beyond the pale to them. They won't accept it. And so it's I guess from a federalist perspective, what I hope happens. I mean, I hope that the Trump administration is able to do, and I think this is what kind of Charlie was about, is able to seize enough power that the defeat of these forces and the dismantling of these power structures can be done in an orderly fashion under the color of law, because that'll just be so much cleaner than hashing out the conflict, as amateurs, in a decentralized way. I mean, that's Yugoslavia. That's like best case, it's like the Russian, the collapse of the Soviet Union. So I think there's a path, but it involves it involves accepting that the constitutional order will not persist.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Hey, everybody, if you're like me, you've been watching the Fed inflate the dollar into oblivion while politicians bungle trade policy and rack up historic amounts of debt, and you're wondering, how do you protect what you've worked so hard to build? That's why I want to talk to you about Monetary Metals, a company doing something truly revolutionary with gold. We all know gold is a safe haven asset, but let's face it, most gold just sits there in a vault, not doing a whole lot. It holds its value over time, but it doesn't grow for you. What if I told you there's a way to not only own physical gold, but also earn a yield on it, paid in gold, every single month? Well, that's exactly what I do with Monetary Metals. I lease my gold with them and earn an annual yield around 4% in gold, not in paper currency. I keep my ounces, and every month I get more. So think about it. You still benefit from any price appreciation, like what we've been seeing in 2025 with gold pushing past all-time highs, and you also get paid more ounces of gold along the way. And that's what makes this model so exciting. It's a genuine breakthrough. For the first time in decades, gold is functioning as a yield-bearing asset, just like in the classical gold standard days. The Fed can print dollars, they can't print gold. It's time to start growing your wealth in ounces, not just hoping for the best with fiat. Go to monetary-metals.com/woods to learn more and see how you can start earning a gold income too. That's monetary-metals.com/woods. Well, I mean, look, it persists in name only now anyway. But
Right.
I think that's only going to get more and more pronounced. And, the language you're using about the moral convictions of these people, I think is quite appropriate. And it runs counter to the propaganda of Conservatism, Inc., which for years told us that our opponents believe in moral relativism and we need to teach them that there are moral absolutes. That is not true. I have
Absolutely
never
not.
seen people more convinced of the moral truth of their position than these people. I mean, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
True believers.
Yeah. So, all right. So you say, and you're not alone, you say you can't share power with these people. You can't operate a society with these people. You can't, what we know you can't do, or at least you do only with great difficulty, is encourage human flourishing in a society like that. Human flourishing is brought about typically in the kind of society where we're all more or less on board with certain things that are admirable and good and beautiful and to be encouraged. And we haven't got that. But the fact is,
Right.
we are living together and we are sharing power, and these things are going on. So are you saying that that's going to break down soon, or even more to the point, how would you, Kevin Dolan, be if you were, let's say you were the governor of a state and you had power and you were very popular, how would the way you govern, let's say Utah, I pick at random, be different from how maybe you might have governed Utah 40 years ago?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would be acting as aggressively as I possibly could. See, I think essentially something like partition is almost inevitable, where people move to jurisdictions that are more friendly to their values, and then those jurisdictions separate. And so I would be preparing the ground for something like that in as orderly a fashion as possible. And I would sort of be, and this is kind of like in the interest of the more like left-wing citizens, actually, is I would be passing laws that make it unfriendly to be there, that make it like not a nice place to live if you hold those values. Because getting people to sort of move of their own accord as a result of just like, hey, this isn't, the government doesn't reflect my values around here. That's way, way, way better than what I think is coming if these changes are not implemented, because it's not a sectional conflict like the war between the states. We are cheek by jowl on top of each other, completely intermixed. And that's what I see as like the fundamental danger here is living right on top of people who have these literally violent disagreements. Like one of the things that everybody said about Charlie was like, I mean, all of my friends were like, "Oh, I have more extreme opinions than Charlie." Like, and that's not to say like I think Charlie's value alignment personally is deeper than what he said publicly. But like in terms of what he said publicly, things he got in trouble for, were not particularly controversial right-wing things. They were moderate conservative things, and it's just like stuff that my uncles believe and stuff that my grandpa would have believed. And it's like, and you heard millions of people, literally millions of people being like, well, maybe he shouldn't have been shot for that, but it's kind of close,
Yeah.
And so it's like, what would they do to somebody like me? And right now, the fiscal situation is such that people are still going to work in the morning. They still have jobs. The lights are still on. The trains are still running. And that level of animosity and violence is already here. And so it's like, what is going to happen when the EBT cards don't scan anymore? Or like, what is going to happen when all of these people, by one means or another, are no longer employed and employable? I think that's going to be a disaster. And the more distance we have from each other when that happens, the better. Because then people will already be with like-minded people, which will encourage a more pro-social behavior, more pro-social orientation for everybody. So yeah, I would say like I would want Utah to be pretty hostile to libs. And by the way, like from a pragmatic perspective, if I lived in Massachusetts, I would want to encourage the red guys, get out any way that I could. It would be a lot harder to impose the kinds of things that would be necessary to make that happen. But I believe that. I think people need to get out of these places. And then, yeah, like if I were the governor of a red state, I would be rooting for and working toward greater power in the hands of the Trump administration. Like I would be stepping my foot on the gas. Like we need to win conclusively so that these changes are in the hands of sane people and not crazy people. And so that as few people get hurt on both sides as possible. The more power is contested, the more there is controversy about who is in charge and who is more powerful, the bloodier the working out of the conflict is. But and this is one of the things that's encouraging about what I've seen so far, is that there's a lot of people sort of screeching about how authoritarian Trump is being, but there's not a lot of actual, organized response to it, which tells me that there's not as much like physical willingness to resist as I may have thought. And I know that sounds like dark or whatever, but like you actually want a situation where everybody knows who the government is and everybody knows who's in charge. So yeah, like I guess I would say I believe in all the things that I used to believe in terms of like the society I want to live in. I want to live in a society where everybody's free. I want to live in a society where ideas are discussed in the open and where people are not afraid of their government or of their neighbors. I just don't think we live in that kind of a society right now. And so it's like, whose boot do you want on whose neck? Well, I want the sane party to have the boot. That's what I want.
All right, let's switch to something totally unrelated, but not really. And I want to say something about Exit Group, or about Exit, because to me it is immensely frustrating that our side has so many conferences that don't really do anything, that they're just rah-rah festivals. People get up, give a rah-rah speech, and everybody goes home and nothing comes of it. We have more podcasts than you can possibly believe, Kevin. More podcasts than you can possibly believe. I refuse to take the blame for that because I've been around for a while. I'm talking about all these newcomers. Everybody in the world has a podcast.
Get off Tom's block.
That's right. Don't you know I'm in charge here? But my point in raising that is that I think there are things we could be doing that are productive other than podcasts and letters to the editor and speeches that don't accomplish anything and conferences that make us feel good about ourselves. Now, once in a while, you do need to be made to feel good about yourself. It can't all be the boot every day.
Sure.
But geez, we need to do something productive. And I want you to take a minute to talk about some examples of things that happen in Exit.
Yeah, the deepest shared orientation that we have with the school is this concept of practical liberty. That it's not a question of what you're allowed to do on paper. It's a question of what can you actually do? What can you get away with? Who can stop you from doing what you want to do? And so we've had guys create startup businesses. A huge part of our thesis is that like the tyranny that we live under still, was established via kind of underhanded procedural means. And one of the consequences of that is that it has particular ways of detecting dissent. Like, it's not like Cuba, it's not like the Soviet Union where they can just put a bag over your head in the middle of the night. Like, what they have to do is, catch you saying something wrong on the internet and then go to your HR department. And then your HR department has to tell your boss, like, this guy's a hostile work environment risk. And then they have to fire you, and then you lose your health insurance. Like, that's how you're punished. And that system has the advantage of sort of flying under the radar and not being thought of as the thought policing mechanism that it is. But it has the disadvantage of, if you run a window tinting business, or if you're the founder of a startup, or, anything basically outside the W-2 system, there aren't a whole lot of concrete ways for them to control your speech. And so, we have guys starting businesses. We had a company that was formed in our business that just recently signed, what is it? An 8-figure DoD contract. We had another business startup. We funded a movie to the tune of $500K, which I think many Tom Woods listeners were part of that as well.
Hey everybody, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor, Persist SEO. If you're getting buried by your competition online, then build your brand, your reputation, and your lead flow with digital marketing by Persist SEO. If you're a small local business trying to compete against large companies in the service industry, then increase your visibility with Persist SEO. What if you have low or no leads coming in on a consistent basis? Well, then website search engine and conversion optimization can help move the needle to a more prosperous business model for you. Are you tired of cold calling and networking? Use your website as a lead generation engine. What if you're not showing up for your services in the search engines? Well, get found with Persist SEO Expert Search Engine Optimization. All you have to do is call 770-580-3736 or visit them at ineedseo.help for a free website audit and consultation. That's 770-580-3736 or ineedseo.help. In fact, I think we contributed to 2 films by that same filmmaker. I mean, you just have this sense that you're doing something, and it's also great to know that there's actually a really talented filmmaker in our circles. That you look around, that's what I realized going to the conference that I hold where we talk about practical things, was that this world is filled with really impressive people. Like we have our weirdos, but we also have very impressive people. Sometimes they're the same people. But, there's something we can do here. We can accomplish something great if we just, if we put our minds to it and are determined not to just, twiddle our thumbs or, again, write that letter to the editor. I mean, I think that, that time for that's over.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking for some guidance in how to build things together, how to find like-minded people. I feel like a lot of people think they're on an island, and they're not. Like, I mean, some of our strongest groups, our strongest chapters of the group are in New York, they're in DC, they're in Seattle, like they're in deep blue metros. And, one of the consequences of sort of our new media environment is that you're not getting different news if you live in Charlotte than you are, or you have different internet. Like everybody's getting the same bad stuff. They're getting the same good stuff. And so there's lots of values aligned guys in deep blue metros who are working for deep blue companies. And frankly, a lot of like the best brain power in the country is in these cities. And so it's like, you have to find each other, but it's so isolating to be surrounded by this, in my opinion, false consensus. Like I think people in those metros are more open-minded than they appear, but they're afraid to speak out. And so creating situations where people can find each other and share ideas and build things together, you create a situation where, instead of having to work for that giant blue woke corporation, you can go to work with people that you like and you can work on projects that you care about. And one of the things that I have found is, yes, like you said, tons of people who are already, very impressive and accomplished. But there's also tons of people who, I was a finance drone before I started doing this, and I had no illusions about like ever being successful or accomplishing anything important with that career. Like I was like a C- finance drone. And so I encounter a lot of guys who are just profoundly underutilized, and that sort of makes them feel like this is all I'm ever going to be, and I guess I should just support my family and just cash the checks, and this is what life is. And getting to take those guys and to see the genius that emerges when they're working on something they actually care about, that's profoundly meaningful to me. Not least because I know exactly what that feels like to wake up and go like, oh no, I actually have tons of potential. There's so much capacity that I didn't know was there.
Yeah. See, so this is Kevin's group. This is Exit. So exitgroup.us. I refuse to believe that there's nobody listening to this who isn't nodding his head to everything Kevin is saying. I refuse to believe that. But my listener base is really solid, with really, really good, smart, talented people who indeed may be underutilized. So, at least check out exitgroup.us. I mean, at least look at it. And I know when you try to promote something on the internet, on a podcast, it's hard because, if I send it in my newsletter, well, there's a link right on their screen. They can just click it. Well, people might be driving around or something. All right. So when you get to the red light, you type in exitgroup.us. Because if you belong in there with Kevin, you'll know. You already know you belong in there with him. And when you get there, when you get to your destination, write to him and go from there. But you should probably be part of it. If it's,
thank you so much, Tom.
Oh, but I mean, like, when you hear this kind of talk and you're saying, yeah, that would be better. That would be much better than what I thought my fate was for my whole life. Then go to the website and talk to Kevin Dolan. He's a smart guy. He's hooked up with people who will impress the heck out of you in Exit. And it's going to be deeply meaningful for you and very important for you, potentially. And you're going to be writing, you'll thank Kevin, but you'll remember it was all Woods who really pushed you to go there. You'll thank me, with an email or something.
I want to tell you, Tom, when I first came on your show, this thing was maybe like 3 weeks old. It was brand new. And we had like 30 or 40 guys jump on as a result of that first show. And that was hugely instrumental in terms of this being something that could support my family and that I could actually do for a living. So I just wanted to.
Oh, that is amazing. I'm glad to hear that.
And I mean, it means a lot to me. It means a lot to the guys because, like, if this thing, I mean, there are incredible things that have been accomplished in the last 3 years that are a consequence of we caught the wind in the sails in those first early weeks. So it means a lot.
Well, I'm glad. What I like also is that now you have a lot of children. But if you go out of town, like for example, you go into my mastermind in Seattle. So while you were there, you thought, I got my guys in Seattle. We're going to have an impromptu meetup.
That's right.
And there's so little of that. I mean, we need to meet each other in person, guys.
Yes.
I mean, in this world where everything's Twitter and stuff, this is not real. You got to get out and meet people. And there are so many opportunities now, like with Exit or my event for my school of life or my mastermind. My mastermind is the greatest time in the world. I mean, we're going to Nashville. We're going to have a private suite with Kane, the wrestler, and then a few months later, we're going to the Virgin Islands and we're going to be having our business meetings where we help each other in a huge mansion. And I've got a chef coming who's going to make a 4-course meal with wine pairing with 2 servers serving it to us. You don't want to be part of that? Come on, all these things are out there for you. Because some of us just got tired of staring at a screen all day and thought we ought to try something different. So exitgroup.us for Kevin and woodsmastermind.com for me. I mean, I know I have people listening to this who are smart, ambitious. They want to get to that next level. They like elite experiences. They like hanging out with smart people. And they like not being the smartest person in the room. Because the smartest person in the room doesn't get as much out of it as the dumbest person. In fact, I won't say the name, but there's a guy my listeners know very well who said at our last meeting, I've never been happier to be the dumbest person in the room, because he walked out of there with, I mean, if he doesn't make an extra 6 figures this year, I'm going to smack him around. So woodsmastermind.com, exitgroup.us, and then the Tom Woods School of Life. Kevin and I work on that together. Could you imagine? So here I have my thing that I do alone. Kevin has his thing he does alone. Imagine when Woods and Dolan combine. What that, does the universe even allow that? I don't know. But
it's incredible.
To get people to give it a try, my School of Life program, I give away 11 things, and you can keep them even if you hate my membership. You can keep them even if you hate it. And they're the 11 best things. They're better than anything your mother ever gave you. I'll tell you that. Way better. You know, she's a lovely woman, but she didn't give you these 11 things. So 11freebies.com is the website for that. I'll put all this stuff up at tomwoods.com/2697. All these links will be up there. 11freebies.com, woodsmastermind.com, and exitgroup.us. Now, I have just violated every rule of marketing, which says give people only one plan of, only one call to action, right?
Yeah.
But you know what, Kevin? I've decided that I'm going to break a rule once in a while. I've decided that my people are smart enough to juggle 3 links. And if they don't remember the link, they can go to tomwoods.com/2697. They'll see all the links there. Because I feel like people go into Barnes & Noble and they don't say, oh, there are so many books I can't choose, and then they just leave. They make a decision. They buy a book.
Can I pitch for a second?
Oh, yeah. Pitch as long as you want. After that fiasco I just engaged in, go ahead.
My experience with the Mastermind, I attend as often as I can. I think I've only missed 1 or 2. It is the highest octane room I've ever been in terms of just, the concept of a mastermind, right? Is you come bring your situation, your challenges, and you ask for advice. And the biggest problem with asking for advice is like dumb advice, right? It's you got to listen to somebody give you like an idea that won't work, and it's ridiculous, and you just sort of have to nod politely, and none of that at these masterminds. It is people from all different industries, all different backgrounds. Some of them are more technical, some of them are more, like me, salesy, humanities type. It doesn't matter. Like, everyone there understands running a business, and they understand like the fundamentals. And when you have this diversity of perspectives that all are incredibly smart and are all kind of looking at the same problem, the stuff that emerges is incredible. And like, I've had people kind of gasp when I tell them, what it costs, but it's like, no, everybody who goes there, like they walk out and they make that money back like the next day. Like of
course they do. Yeah. And when you look at other masterminds, I feel like I'm slumming around here. Mine is a cheap one compared to some of the other ones that are out there.
And these guys get to make, they get to make the libertarian jokes, and they get to, you're participating with people who you don't have to hide anything around. You don't have to, and so not only like in terms of like, sometimes it even ramifies to like business questions, like, HR stuff and how you run your shop. But like, I have heard from so many guys who, they come to my group, they come to a mastermind like this, and they go, I didn't realize how much I was censoring myself and how little of myself I was bringing, and then how little help I could get, because people didn't understand my vision. They didn't understand that this was all aiming toward, building my family or building a legacy, like stuff that to somebody with a different ideological orientation just doesn't compute.
Oh, yeah. Or what if you walk into a typical mastermind and say, well, the goal here is for my wife to be able to stay home.
Right.
They would look at you like there was something the matter with you. Whereas at my group, you'd have to say something pretty out there for people to look at you funny.
Yeah. And it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it does. And plus, we have people in there who they couldn't censor themselves if they tried. Some of these people, John, as an example, couldn't censor himself if he tried. So it's just as well that he doesn't. But so we launched that about a little over 2 years ago, and I didn't know if it was going to go anywhere. But it really, the 3 meetings a year that we have are some of my favorite times of the year. I mean, I'm so excited about the next one, and then And then I decided to go to the Virgin Islands with these guys because I was sitting there literally in the Virgin Islands. And I said, someday the Mastermind needs to come down here. It's a really beautiful place. And then I thought, wait a minute, I run the Mastermind. Like, why am I sitting here thinking how wonderful it would be? I'm just going to declare it. And that's what I did. See, I'm running society the way Kevin Dolan would have run Utah. I'm just
fiat.
Right. And you know what? It's a good decision for everyone. It turns out to be a good decision for everyone. So we're doing it. We're having a great old time. But yeah, I mean, of course you guys should be in it. I mean, geez, for heaven's sake, the stuff you get out of it, the friendships you make, these are really great guys. And we're always doing amazing things too. So it's like, especially if you're the kind of person, I just like the elite. I want whatever the best thing is that you have. I want it. This is it.
Yeah.
All right.
Wonderful crew.
So, but I want to conclude. So remember, TomWoods.com/2697, links for everything we talked about. But I want you to check out exitgroup.us because, I mean, Kevin, as he said, Kevin built this from nothing. Kevin's the guy who built it up. And I found out about it. He came on the show and I was so impressed with it. So impressed that I remember I initially offered, I wanted you to merge with me. And then we eventually decided, well, instead of being an egotistical jerk, why don't you let Kevin have his thing and you have your own? So instead I had Kevin come work with me and we worked together on the School of Life project. But it's now I will tell you, my School of Life program is for anybody. Kevin's is a literal fraternity. It is for men only. But if you are a man, and chances are if you're listening to the Tom Woods Show, there is a darn good chance you are a man. If my demographic surveys mean anything, chances are you're a man. Check it out because that maybe you provide for the family well enough, but that feeling in the pit of your stomach, like I can't bear going back to this place. That's no way to live. And Kevin will help you out. So exitgroup.us. Kevin, thanks a million.
Thank you very much, Tom.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.